Hey everyone, it's Tim Baldermann, and I want to welcome you to this edition of Too Honest for Social Media, where we talk about local, state, and federal issues that affect us here at home. I'm really honored and pleased to have a couple of great guests with us today. We've got Brad Cole, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Illinois Municipal League, and one of our state representatives, Anthony DeLuca from the 80th District. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
All right, let's get started. Talk a little bit about your backgrounds. Anthony, if you want to get started, go ahead.
Yeah, I thank you for having us. First of all, great job you do here in the village of New Lenox. A beautiful community. Your village board works well with you.
Mm-hmm.
Your park district is top-notch. You really do a fantastic job, so it's great to be in New Lenox with everyone. I started in the family business. Back in Chicago Heights, our family operated and owned a scavenger, full-service waste management company for 58 years, and that's what I did from a young person. And we had a successful business, and we sold in 2012 after 58 years of operating. I first got involved in politics when I ran for the school board in 1995. I was pretty young. I was elected to 2 terms on the Bloom Township High School District Board of Education, served 2 terms, 8 years, and that's when I ran for mayor of Chicago Heights and was elected mayor of Chicago Heights, served 6 years. And in 2009, there was a vacancy. My predecessor was appointed a judge. So there was an opportunity there, and I was selected to fill that vacancy. And I've been in Springfield since 2009.
All right, excellent. Well, it's good to have you here. Brad, how about you?
Well, not unlike Representative DeLuca, I have been in local government, state government, and federal government. I actually worked at all 3 levels. One of my first jobs was working for a state senator, but then was in local office, elected to the Park District Board, School Board, City Council, a couple of terms as mayor, all in Carbondale, which is in deep southern Illinois. Was Deputy Chief of Staff to the Governor and was State Director for United States Senator and been at the Illinois Municipal League for a dozen years. So a little bit of government experience. In the middle of that, I was in the private sector. I was Senior Vice President for Pepsi, managing 5 states, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, and Arkansas, or part of those 5 states. So some private sector and some public sector experience.
That's great. Well, it's really useful to us to have, as mayors, to have people who are either representing us like Illinois Municipal League does, or to have state representatives or state senators that understand local government. I know that's kind of difficult because, as we know, all politics is local, and we are the ones that are providing the services on the ground. And both of you have been great advocates for us, so we appreciate that. Let's jump right in and talk a little bit about Illinois Municipal League's work, what you do, and Representative DeLuca, your committee that you're on, and how those work together. What are you doing daily?
So the Illinois Municipal League represents the 1,294 cities, villages, and towns throughout Illinois. New Lenox is a premier community, one of those villages, and as the representative said, you do a good job here. You have a very nice community. A lot of times people will contact us and complaining about something in their community, and I'll say, let me tell you, I can tell you the bad communities. You're not one of them, and this is one of the premier communities. So we work with everybody, large and small, from the city of Chicago, which is 2.7 million people, all the way down to population 14.
Wow.
Which was our first capital, Kaskaskia, Illinois.
Wow.
So our job is to provide educational resources and do training. Of course, we have a big annual conference for that. We also provide advocacy service, which is not just legislatively. We work with legislators, but also legal advocacy. So we write briefs, and we actually take cases for communities that we think will have a larger statewide impact. And then we do the same at the federal level, too. We've taken cases to the United States Supreme Court.
Wow.
And we've tried to stop cases going to the United States Supreme Court. So we do a little bit of everything, and then hopefully that's educate and advocate, and hopefully we can empower our members, give them opportunities to get involved and to take on leadership roles either regionally or statewide. So we do a little bit of everything for everybody.
That's great. And now tell me about one of the committees that you serve on that works with local government and with IML.
Sure, I chair the House Cities and Villages Committee. I've chaired it since 2013. And I'll tell you, when I was first on the committee and new in Springfield, it was before I was chair, and we were at our Cities and Villages Committee dinner in Springfield, and we would do that as a committee once a year. And there was a gentleman walking around, and I didn't know who this guy was. And I'm saying to everyone, who's this guy walking around? Why is he here? Why is he at this dinner with us? Well, I really want to compliment Brad and his team, because everyone under the dome knows who Brad is, and that's whether it's good or bad, but they know who Brad is, and he does an outstanding job. But this was his predecessor. Okay. And it just gives an example of how far along, at least from the time I have served, the Illinois Municipal League has moved in advocating for issues that are important to municipal governments and really being out there, building relationships with legislators, which is important, testifying in committees and understanding the issues. It's really important.
Yeah, I want to say, the two of us have something in common, and all three of us will at some point in time, but we've all been mayors, so we're former mayors, and there is life on the other side, by the way, just so you know that.
Sure. Yeah.
But
not ready for it yet, but yes.
No, but I hesitate to refer to him as Representative DeLuca, because I always refer to him as Chairman DeLuca, because he is the chair of one of the two most important committees in the General Assembly for us, the House, Cities, and Villages. The other is Senate Local Government Committee. But the House, Cities, and Villages Committee is someplace we have gone and said, we need your help. We either have to push something or we have to stop something. And the chairman has been the tip of that spear. Anytime we need something, if he can do it, he will. And that committee is made up of people that come from local government, mostly cities and villages. There are some people that have other experiences, and some that don't have any local government experience. But that committee is a real benefit to us. And I appreciate what he said about our work at the league, but there has been no greater champion for municipal government in Illinois in the last at least 20 years that I know of than Anthony DeLuca. That's a fact. That's not a patronizing comment. That's not because we're here sitting together today. That's a fact. And I don't think people understand everything touches local governments.
That's right.
When there's 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 bills that get filed in a session, we're tracking half of those because 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 of them affect municipalities. And when we have somebody that is in senior service, I guess, a long-time member of the General Assembly with seniority, somebody that gets that, it makes it a whole lot easier. And that's what he does. He gets it, but so does his committee. And I think that's a good thing. We work together very well.
Well, that's great, and I do know that as well. Anytime I pick up the phone and really call any of our people, they're great. But Anthony, you're always the first one to respond, and you do look out for us. Being a former mayor, you haven't forgotten where you've come from and how important that is. So let's dive right in.
Can I say something else on that, if I may?
Yeah, sure.
Quick?
Go ahead.
Because when I first got to Springfield, there's a lot of criticism of legislators. There's plenty of criticism to go around with legislators in Springfield, but there are many capable people on both sides of the aisle on a wide range of issues. But I saw a void when I first got to Springfield on this issue of local government relations and municipal government and things of that nature, which I brought up that story about Brad's predecessor. So there was a void there, and it was right in my wheelhouse.
Right.
It was really right in my wheelhouse. So I was happy to jump in with both feet on that issue.
And we appreciate the work you've done. And the issue I really want to talk about, for starters, here is the local government distributive fund, and that's the proportionate share of the income tax that comes back to communities. That was at 10% and has been slowly eroded over the years. We're now at 6.49%. If you can talk a little bit about the local government distributive fund, why it's so important, and what you've done to try and help municipalities with that.
Yeah, it's the most important and most reliable funding for municipal government. And as you mentioned, it's a portion of the state income tax. It was at 10 for 40 years, or give or take.
40 years.
And it was reduced. Now it's at 6.47. And there's not a lot of members who were in the General Assembly at the time that the local government distributed fund was reduced along with the increase of the income tax, which took place in 2011.
Right.
And it was supposed to be temporary. It was supposed to be temporary. It never would have passed if it wasn't sold and promised to be temporary. So very disappointed that wasn't upheld. So we've been working to try and increase it slowly and restore it. That's how we say it. We want to restore the funding from 6.47 to 10. It's a lot of money. It comes out to about $1.3 billion annually that should be going out to municipal governments. As we know, municipal governments, police, fire, first responders, it's a big portion of the budget, usually the largest portion. So that's really where a lion's share of this funding would go. And we've had legislation over the years. It's never moved. It's going to be a budget-making issue where any changes that would happen. It's not going to be by an individual piece of legislation that would move through the General Assembly, but we've always filed them, so we kind of set a marker. So we let all the folks know where we stand. But I talk to mayors all over the state. There's different council of governments that they bring their group to Springfield, and I'm always available to meet with them and talk about this issue and how important it is that they make it known to their legislator how important this is. I always say when I talk to the groups of mayors that this is a matter of priority. This is really a matter of legislative priority. This could be fixed overnight. This is not a terribly complicated issue. It's a matter of priority. And if the legislature, if there was enough support and enough of members willing to vote to make the change would be made that quickly.
Well, I know that in New Lenox, over the years with the erosion, it's cost us about $25 million from the decrease from 10% and over the years. $25 million for a town of 30,000 people. That's a lot of money. Mm-hmm. I think about the services that we provide and what that could do. But you say it's an overnight fix, and it could be, but clearly to make that up annually, the money would have to come from somewhere. We are constantly talked about the taxes in this state and how we're the highest overall tax rate in the country and whatnot. Where does the money come from to be able to get the LGDF?
Well, we get to ask that question a lot.
Sure.
And I think this is what the chairman's indicating, is that it is a matter of priority. So we're talking about $1 billion. Okay, that's real money.
Sure.
But that's statewide.
Right.
We have 12.5 million people in the state. So it's a matter of, well, are we going to spend $1 billion over here, or are we going to spend it here? And by the way, this is money that was funded for local governments. Sure. I mean, that's what it's for. So it got taken away as a priority for something else. And I've sat in legislative leaders' office when they've asked that very question, Mayor. And they say, okay, well, where is this money going to come from? And I hand them a list.
Sure.
And I said, here is $1 billion you could cut to fund the local governments so that they can put in infrastructure, they can pay for their pensions, which, by the way, you tell us we have to pay for, or they could pay for this or that or the other. So there's always a way to do it. Let's not forget either that in 15 years ago, when this cut occurred, the state budget was $30 or less billion. Today, in a week, it's going to be $56 billion. So there's been growth. It's where did those dollars go, or where are they being spent? And it's a matter of priorities.
Well, what I don't understand then is, and we're going to get into the build plan and some of the success we've had with that, but representatives and senators, they are out there. You're out in our community. You're hearing people. You're talking to mayors as well. Why isn't there an appetite to say collectively, look, here's $1 billion that we could cut that certainly should not be prioritized over providing local services for our people? Why is there no appetite from that? Where is the pressure coming from that prohibits the majority of the legislators to say, yeah, clearly this is not as important as funding police and fire and infrastructure?
Well, some of the issues that we deal with, certainly LGDF, this is a nuts and bolts of government type of issue. It's what I spend the majority of my time involved in. I am much more interested in policy. I am much more interested in the nuts and bolts of government. I'm much more interested in trying to solve problems. And that is not exciting stuff. That doesn't get the media to come out. That's not great on press releases. And I think that's one of the challenges is even though another challenge is we've had a huge turnover in members of the General Assembly over the last 10 years, for example. There's a lot of new members. So you spend all this time trying to inform other legislators on the importance of the decisions we make and the impact they have on municipal government, and then the next thing you know, they've been replaced. They've retired, they move on to something else, and now you're starting from scratch again. That's a big challenge right there. But I think that has a lot to do with it. There are much more politically beneficial things that legislators can do out in their community than the type of things that excite me and motivate me. And
I think to his point, there's more to this than just LGDF.
Sure.
There's a whole bowl full of acronyms out there. MFT, PPRT, TRF. There's a lot of these funds that we deal with, and nobody really should need to be aware of what those things are. It just should happen, and you should be able to do your job as mayor, and the village board can, adopt its budget on time and do all that stuff. I think it's easy to get caught up in, and I'm not a legislator, but I think what he's saying here is it's easy to get caught up in today's social or political or other issue and like, well, let's put $1 million or $1 billion into this, which is maybe a national issue that's affecting Illinois, versus the nuts and bolts of running government at the local and state levels. And that's where he, I think, thrives, is how do we administer government for people? How do we do what the people need, the basics, so you can do your job to give your residents what they need, versus getting caught up in, well, let's get into this national issue and put $1 billion over there for that really should be coming to this.
Or $2.5 billion into illegal immigration that was spent instead of taking care of. And now, that is obviously a more complicated issue than it sounds. And, you're talking about kids that are here that need some, but clearly there's a lot of room there, and there's a lot of things beyond. But you're making the point that we rail against all the time here, whether it's I see it at the county level, I see it anywhere there's partisanship, at the state level. It happens in other states. It happens certainly nationally. Everything is politically driven as opposed to providing services. It's exactly what you said. How can I get my name out there? Here's a cause. It's a platform issue as opposed to a service issue. And I really think as a mayor, the way that we have to do this is by educating. It's a shame that, excuse me, that the people do have to know more about this stuff, but we have seen success when we've got the average person getting engaged and involved in contacting legislators and not letting them off the hook for this political nonsense.
Yeah, and you do a good job of that, and these types of activities get information out to people. I do want to say, there's 177 legislators.
Sure.
So, 118 in the House, 59 in the Senate. They are not experts on everything.
Sure.
I mean, first of all, they are just people, and they come from all of us. So a lot of times they get elected, and then they're expected to know how to do everything, and all of a sudden overnight run a $56 billion organization, or at least a third of it. And that's a high expectation. And so not everybody is walking in with local government experience or private business experience or any kind of experience necessarily. So it's, there is an expectation that maybe is unreasonable for the entire General Assembly to know everything about everything and to see every aspect of it. One of the things when I was mayor, and you both do this all the time, I'd go to an event and somebody's like, oh, you're always at these events. Why do you come to these? And I'm like, well, it's important to you, so it's important to me as your mayor. And that's something to keep in mind for legislators. They've got a district, they've got 100 and however many thousand people that they represent in the 105,000 people that you represent in the House. 108,000. And, twice that in the Senate. And so everything's important to their constituents. They got to balance that for themselves too. And so there's a lot out there. Our piece isn't number one for everybody. It's number one for us. So our job is to make sure they understand that so that you can do your job. But there are a lot of different things out there. It's just complicated.
It is very complicated. But I mean, in reality, we are now, I mean, it's always been there to a certain extent, but the more divided we become, the more political everything becomes. And these are political driven issues as opposed to policy like you're talking about or service related issues. And it's really frustrating when you see that happen. Nobody wants to compromise anymore because you don't want to give the other side a win, and we all lose because of that. And there needs to be that kind of conversation and come together. And again, it's not just here in Springfield, it's everywhere. But it's a real problem.
And if I can add one more thing to that, I mentioned at the opening about our family business. And I had the absolute blessing of having that opportunity when we had that family business. I was on and off a truck for 25 years. I have 20 years as a Teamster, Local 731. I understand what it means to meet payroll and pay bills and be a salesman and, have customers that you have to provide that service for. Has really served me well when I've gone on to my political life, as mayor especially. And I just wanted to bring that up because when you talk about how there's 177 legislators and they're all different and they all have different experiences, I'm just one example of that.
And everybody, there's a big difference between signing the front of a check and signing the back of a check.
Right.
And not everybody has the experience of signing the front of a check, which is like staying up at night. I hope we can make payroll tomorrow.
Well, but I can tell you there's frustration. I spoke to a governor one time. I won't call him out, but we were talking about, of course, property taxes and whatnot. And so pensions came up, and he talked about TRS. And he said, well, we're going to help by making teachers pay more toward TRS. That's going to help the taxpayers. And I said, you do realize that at that time, the majority of school districts are paying their teachers' share of TRS. So that comes from the property taxpayers. It's not coming out of the teacher's paycheck. You increase the contribution, the taxpayers are going to have to pay. He said, you're kidding me. And this was the governor.
When I worked for the United States Senate, one of the things that I always like to say was there's no tax dollars involved. It's all federal funds. And so I say that now about the state. There's no tax dollars. It's all state funds.
Sure.
There's only one person that pays for anything.
That's right.
The taxpayer.
That's right.
And whether it's coming out of their pocket directly because they got to put it on the counter to pay at the cash register, or it's coming out of their paycheck, or they're putting it in escrow with their mortgage payment every month, it's still coming out of the same person's pocket, man or woman, young or old, the taxpayer.
They are, but I have found, and I'm sure you two know this, especially in your roles as mayor, we're building a new wastewater treatment plant. It's over $100 million. We have the redundant water line, like Michigan Water Line. Our portion of that's $30 million. We have had to steadily increase our water and sewer bills, 5 to 6% every year for the last decade because I said, this is coming, this is coming. People don't like it. But if you give them an explanation and they see where their tax dollars are going, they may still bitch about it, but they at least appreciate the transparency and the honesty. You want quality of life. You want to be able to take a shower and go to the bathroom. We got to have, and what we're not seeing a lot of is transparency. We're seeing a lot of political speak, things that really don't have you talk about some of those $1 billion you could cut. There is no real good justification for it. So you get the political line and you move on. And that's really what's, I think, upsetting a lot of the taxpayers here. So, all right, we'll move on. Build plan. Even as we acknowledge,
and what you're talking about is Governor Pritzker's Build Initiative,
yes.
which is his housing development proposal.
Yes,
okay. Building up Illinois local development.
Yes, and people in this community are really, really familiar with it, as are a lot of communities. We have to be fair. There is obviously a national housing shortage. there is an affordability crisis. These are real issues that we're dealing with. One of the things, of course, is there's a housing shortage because people were able to refinance their homes at 2.5% and 3%, and there's no way in hell they're going to. I looked at selling my home and moving into a townhome. I could buy something $200,000 less and make the same mortgage payment because of the interest rate. So why on earth would I sell? Right. So that's a problem. The biggest issue we had, and I'm sure you had, if you could talk a little bit about this, is there was no seat at the table for local government. And I'll be damned, and this is something that we appreciate that the legislator stepped up. We have seen local control taken away far too often. We've seen it with solar, with wind, even with some of the internet access to people. I got people complaining to me because every internet company is ripping up the parkways. Well, we don't have a choice. We can't tell them no. And now looking to take planning and zoning away from local municipalities, there's no way that can happen. So if you can talk a little bit about why do you feel we weren't given a seat at the table, and what do we do to make sure that in the veto session this isn't rammed down our throats?
Well, so the governor released his proposal on February 18th as part of his state budget address. I don't think anybody knew about it ahead of time. We certainly didn't. The night before, we were told we're going to have a housing program tomorrow. Okay. Right. But we didn't have any of the details. So then, for the next month, we're trying to figure out what this thing is. So we're legislators, I think. And then we release our own proposal, which is instead of just saying no, which we could easily do, let's say, well, instead of these 6 or 7 ideas that we don't agree with because of the preemption of local authority, here's 24 ideas that surely one of them is okay. Like pick and choose. And if you don't like these, let's come up with more. So the Illinois Municipal League said, let's come up with alternative ideas, suggestions, since we were not included in any part of it at all. We had no requests from the governor's office. They denied our requests to be involved. No communication, absolutely nothing from the day it was announced until the last day of the legislative session. So from February 18th until May 31st, nothing. So we were trying to say, here are our ideas. If you don't like them, fine, let's come up with more, let's work together. We relied on people like Chairman DeLuca, who said, if it's going to take away local control, I'm not for it. We're going to hold tight. And a lot of legislators did that. Yes. Legislative leaders did it. And it was because people who listened to this and local officials like you stood up and said, okay, we've taken it on cuts to our funding. We've taken it on mandates. We've taken it on these preemptions. We're not going to take it on eliminating local input, right, public hearings, local control, local zoning. And the General Assembly heard that, I think, and they've stuck with it. And Chairman DeLuca was one of them. I mean,
100%.
If I don't like when people say 110% because there's no such thing. Right. That's the new 100. Right. He's at 100.
No, there's no question.
And so were a lot of others.
100%. They did. Clearly, because it didn't go anywhere.
Didn't go anywhere.
And that's great. So how do we ensure, because I'm going to tell you, we did get the people engaged in this, not just myself, but other mayors then did as well, and a lot of community leaders did. We have to stop this, It's so hypocritical when we hear out of Springfield that Washington is infringing on state rights, but then Springfield wants to infringe on local rights and local authority. How do we make sure in this veto session, we know it's coming back, but how do we make sure that this does not get passed, that we don't lose local control?
Yeah, the description that Brad just gave was excellent. Mm-hmm. And the way the process took place. I think it's important that the local control component of this and the way that this would change the characteristics of a local community it's really tremendous. The alternative plan that the Illinois Municipal League offered was a great strategy. I'm sure you looked at the whole and you read the whole thing. I did as well. And it was very comprehensive. But it was all important. It was all important to have answers to what the governor was trying to do. So in terms of what can happen in veto session, we don't know. We'll know more as the summer progresses. I don't imagine, because it never happens this way, that we will just show up for the first day of veto session and it'll go up on the board.
Right.
That's very unlikely that would happen. So I'm hoping and assuming that there will be more conversations throughout the summer with the Illinois Municipal League and other members of municipal government about how we'll approach this. I also want to acknowledge you again, because what you did was outstanding.
Thank you.
And the residents of New Lenox and really all across the state should know how important it was what you did by getting on social media and making it known what was involved in this and how it would impact communities. So important. Because when I was meeting with mayor groups in Springfield, I was using you without your permission. I was using you as the example of what they should do as well, because we have to get the word out. Your legislators need to know the way, legislators in my area are hearing from their local mayors as well.
Yeah, and the key is, just like I said, that not every legislator is an expert on everything. Neither is every citizen. And my attitude is, Joe and Mary Sixpack are supposed to go about living their lives, raising their kids, taking care of their parents, doing their job, doing whatever they want to do. They shouldn't have to worry about these things. That's what the local officials are for. And you and a lot of others, but I saw all your comments at village board meetings but folks like Mayor Worley in Naperville, put out very good information. People up in McHenry County, DuPage, Kane, Kendall, all throughout the suburbs and across the state, because this was a statewide issue.
Right.
I mean, we had folks from north to south, east to west, that were saying all the things you were saying, maybe differently, but trying to inform their residents and also inform their representatives and senators and saying, this is going to change our community. And the piece that we really had a problem with was the misrepresentation that it was not one size fits all. Well, it was.
Right.
When you say this is what everybody has to comply with, that is one size fits all. And when you say, not you, but when it's proposed that this is the standard, that's a preemption. This is the minimum that you can allow. Well, when you have a 2,500 square foot lot minimum, you can't have a 1 acre lot.
Right.
And if you're proposing that, you can't say, but there's still all this local control. It's not. And there was really, I think, some disingenuous efforts out there.
Yeah, at best.
And so we tried to counter that, but that's what you were doing. And that's what we need everybody to do, is to get into it, understand it. And, it's okay to have different communities have different characteristics. This is not about redlining. This is not about keeping people out. I was accused of being a white supremacist, segregationalist, because we want each community, whether they're white, black, brown, yellow, doesn't matter, to be able to make their own decisions and have local input. That conversation shifted. I thought we were talking about affordability. I thought we were talking about how to enhance opportunities for people. Because the argument wasn't gaining traction, they shifted it away from reality.
Sure.
And that was unfortunate.
Well, what bothered me was when the governor was told, hey, there's a lot of local leaders that are opposed to this, he trotted out 3 mayors that were in favor of it. And my response was, well, they don't need state legislation. If they want to change their zoning and they want to allow 2,500 square foot lots, they can do it themselves. You don't need state legislation for that.
So there were 4 mayors that signed an op-ed in the Tribune.
Out of 1,294.
Yeah,
there you go.
And, that's okay.
Yeah, then do it.
And actually, that's what we say. Great.
Yeah.
We want you to do it if that's what you want to do.
Sure.
So we actually followed up with them after the legislative session. I sent them each a formal letter that said, we understand you supported the BUILD program. Please share with us your local ordinances once you pass those, so we can use them as a model for other communities, and we can track the success in your community by doing that.
Yeah. You're not holding your breath, are you, Brent?
Well, I haven't gotten any responses. But
exactly.
There's some issues that when you preempt home rule authority, it requires a supermajority to pass it. So I inquired on this issue. And of course, I was told it only needed 60.
Which is a majority.
71, which is a majority, not a supermajority. I also requested a formal request that this issue be heard in the House Cities and Villages Committee. That didn't happen either. But there were efforts made.
Reference back to I said that committee, can help us.
Yeah, exactly. Here, you guys we got to stop because you're going to push me to a place that I don't want to go right now. But what I will tell you is this. I agree with you. You can't just say, no, we don't like it. I appreciate the work of the IML trying to offer some solutions. Even if they were just, hey, we're open to having a conversation about this. We do agree there's an issue. But the reality is the build program did nothing to address affordability or housing shortages. No. Nothing whatsoever. It just was going to decimate communities if it went through. And I just will tell you, taking away local authority, solar is one. So we've got a couple 100-acre tract of land over here that's surrounded by residential on two sides and a high school on the other, where the developer wanted it to go solar. 70 of the 200 and some acres to go solar. We didn't want that because it was in our planning area for residential, but it was unincorporated. The county was forced. They voted no, but then they were forced by a judge to vote yes for this. The issue isn't just solar. The issue is now the balance of that property, that 130 acres that's surrounded by, is not going to become residential. They're going to try and push industrial or something, and that's detrimental to our homeowners. Mm-hmm. That's why we cannot lose local control. We cannot compromise on losing local control. That's what the people elect us for.
So one of the things that I said during this whole build initiative debate, which oftentimes was just me talking because they wouldn't talk to us.
They did not want to debate.
Is that, okay, so right now, if the village of New Lenox wants to rezone something or there's a big controversial, either pro or con issue, you have to have a public hearing. Mm-hmm. You have to go out, literally physically stake the property. Yep. You've got to send certified mail to all the adjacent property owners. You've got to have it at a city council or village board meeting. You've got to do all this in plain sight of everybody. Well, if some of these proposals that were made or others that may be coming at some point ever happen, then that eliminates all that. And so what is somebody supposed to do that lives on Main Street? Are they supposed to go to Springfield, to the state capitol every day when, by the way, they post hearings with no notice and there's no material to share and you get 2 minutes maybe to speak? That takes away the citizen input. Where is citizen input? At the local level.
Brad, that was the thing that shocked me because I know you got the same email that we got from the governor's office that literally called public hearings a nuisance. A nuisance. I was shocked when I got that. That's why I said I don't have to create this. I'll just take it right from the governor's office himself, saying that the public coming and having a say at a board meeting is considered a nuisance. That's insanity. Well, I don't expect a response from me because it's just crazy. All right, let's switch gears, but I do want to say thank you for your efforts on that. I really, as a mayor, we appreciate that. You were very responsive to me. We talked regularly on this issue, and I do know that you were saying those things to other mayors, and I appreciate that. I realize, though, that as important as lobby days may be and whatnot, getting a phone call from a couple of mayors is nothing compared to getting phone calls and emails from thousands of constituents. Yeah. And I say thank you to the people that really, across the state, that really stepped up and got engaged.
They did it, and because of people like you, so that needs to keep happening.
It does.
It just needs to keep happening.
It does, and that doesn't mean... I am a big believer in compromise. There are things that have to be done. We can't just say no to everything. We do, but... Damn it, we have to have a seat at the table. We have to have some it can't be politically driven. The hottest political topic, of course, is property taxes. And in the state of Illinois, and this is not meant to be a podcast to beat on the governor. I do enough of that. But what really bothers me is when the governor says that he needs to inform Republicans and others that property taxes are a local issue. It has nothing to do with the state of Illinois, which is completely misinformation. So property taxes, there have been, and Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure you know this better than me, since its inception, I think 782 unfunded mandates, 4 of which were fully funded. 300 of some they assume shouldn't have had much impact, but still another 300 that had a financial impact.
Yeah.
And when schools have to hire additional teachers to meet these unfunded mandates, and municipalities and park districts have to do this, that drives up property taxes. So there is a State Mandates Act, correct? That
Yes.
says that if there's a mandate given by the state, they have to fund that. How is it that only 4 of the 782 mandates have been funded by the state of Illinois, and how does that not impact local property taxes?
I want to start with constituent resident engagement is really important. I know that you had just left off on that issue. I wanted to just
Sure.
take it from there for a second.
Sure.
You know, we make it one of our number one priorities in my district office to be in communication with our residents as much as possible. We encourage them to email. You know, it's repdeluca@sbcglobal.net. I should say that, repdeluca@sbcglobal.net. We encourage residents to let us know. Let me know where you stand on issues, because I pay attention to it, and
Right.
it impacts my vote. So I really want to, encourage that to continue. Property taxes is an issue that we could talk about all afternoon.
That's right.
All morning, all afternoon. It's a big issue. It goes back many years with my efforts. In fact, when I receive an email in my district office about property taxes, we have a response that we use that includes all of the media articles that have been written about the bills I've filed, the efforts I've made, so that they know that I'm not coming to the game lately on this, that I've been working on this for many years. So early last year, we created a property tax working group, a House property tax working group. And I was asked to be on that committee. And I hesitated and I said, well, I'm willing to serve on this committee and give my time and make an effort if we are going to have substantive solutions on property taxes. If we're just going to be teetering on the margins and do little things for press releases, then I'm not interested. And I was assured that we're going to be looking at this issue. I was very excited about that because I am willing to make the tough votes that are necessary if we're really going to have property tax reform, because there's no easy solution.
No.
There is no easy solution. We can do little things in Springfield where we deal with exemptions, and we do that all the time. We've slowed that because it's important. But we have not brought forth a substantive change. Now, there was a proposal this year about the millionaire's tax, and a portion of those dollars, whatever it would raise, $5 billion, whatever it was, would go to property tax relief. Well, you can't just throw new money at an infrastructure that's broken. Mm-hmm. So I kept saying that we have to reform the system before we can throw more money at it. This was an initiative of former Governor Pat Quinn, and I worked very closely with him over the last couple of years on this because, this millionaire's tax. And I kept explaining to the former governor, who's a wonderful guy and was working hard on this, that you can't just throw new money at it. You have to reform it. So the Property Tax Working Group, in last year's legislative session and this year's legislative session, we didn't come forth with any real serious changes to property taxes. So unfortunately, you're not going to see any major change because it's going to take a combination of fixing the problem structurally and potentially new dollars. But they have to be lockboxed.
They do.
They have to be locked. There's no way I'm going to support it. I can only speak for myself.
Sure.
No chance I'm going to support it unless it's a lockbox.
If
and
it's
it
just
is
a shifting of funds,
yes, it has to go directly to property tax relief.
Well, and there's a lot of blame to go around. I mean, we've all been around in local government. I'm the mayor of a town, and I'm going to tell you, you can go into, and you talk about at the state level, you could find $1 billion worth. You can go into local government and you can find that the money's not always prioritized there either. I see just retiring now as a school superintendent, and I will say, of the only free public education in Illinois, we refund 100% of the property tax to every one of our residents and have no charges for our students. We're very fortunate because we've got a large industrial base, but I also know in a lot of other communities that have the same thing, they don't. They hire more administrators, they waste money, and they don't do anything for kids, which is really disheartening to me. But so there's a lot of blame to go around on this issue. Is there any hope, do you think, as you're dealing with legislators, that there can be this structural change that Representative DeLuca is talking about?
Well, I think, I'm an optimist by nature.
All right.
I will say that I am heavily weighed down by paranoia, but I am an optimist. But, if we look at property tax, go back 25 years, the state issued property tax refunds under Governor George Ryan. Everybody got a check for $200 or $300, which was a lot of money in 2000, 2001, because the state had so much money and property taxes were an issue. That was 25 years ago. Okay, since then, there have been a handful of property tax task forces that have been named. There was one named between the Department of Revenue and Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity a couple of years ago, that those two agencies, they're supposed to issue a report that's due next week, July 1st. Is anybody other than me thinking about that? Has anybody other than me flagged in their head that, boy, I wonder what's going to happen on July 1st? I would like to see that report. No, just me. But we're going to ask about it, and we're going to say, well, where is it? What's the answer? The working groups, the other committees, there's a lot to talk about, but it's all tied together. So unfunded mandates push costs down to local governments, whether that's a school district, a community college, a township, a park district, a municipality, the county. So where do they go? Well, for counties and municipalities, when their local government distributive fund is cut, the only place they can go is property taxes.
Right.
Okay, so property taxes for that, unfunded mandates, property taxes for that, new programs and services to meet consumer constituent needs, property tax for that.
Pension sweeteners, property taxes for that.
Yeah, right. Pension obligations are mandated by the state. They don't give $1 to local governments for that. Okay, so then you impose property tax extension limitations, PTEL, or tax caps, which say that if you don't raise it 4.99% every year, you'll never get that money back. So that forces people locally to raise their property taxes, local officials, every year, so that they don't lose it because they've got to make up for this other stuff. It is a circular firing squad, and it can be resolved. It's just difficult, but we're talking about math. And so it's, how do we balance all the money in, all the money out, and where the money can come from, remembering that there's only one person that pays for everything, and that's the taxpayer.
That's right.
So it's when I say it's hard, I mean, it's not like the people that are out fixing the roads today, breaking their back, but it is work, and the legislature has to figure it out. But most of the hard part is political capital. And it's being willing to tell somebody no and somebody yes. And what we have said at the Municipal League is, look, just tell us definitively what we're going to have to do, the benefits we have to pay for, the costs we're going to have to incur, and then stop. Just tell us this is what it's going to be, and then we'll figure out how to do it. But when they say this, and then we move the goalpost, and then we move it again, and then they move it again, it's like we can't keep up with it. And that's why property taxes are so high. And, there's 50 states. Everybody's got an issue with property tax. Some don't have property tax.
Right.
Some have really high property tax. Some don't have income tax. Some have really high income tax. We can figure this out.
Sure.
But the way it's working, which is the 7 deadly words of that's the way we've always done it, is probably not best for the taxpayers. And when you go knocking on doors, what do you hear? Property taxes are too high. And this was one of the things, and I'll stop in just a moment, about the governor's housing proposal for affordability. Not once was in that whole proposal did it mention property taxes. Now, what we proposed, we talked about property taxes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So I said in a Senate hearing, I said, how many of you legislators were walking down, knocking on doors, passing your petitions in the primary, and somebody said, boy, if I could just get rid of these zoning hearings, I could sure afford my mortgage. I said, nobody.
Not one.
But everybody said, man, the property taxes are killing me.
That's right. And I just saw, I'm sure you did too, a report from one of the Chicago news stations where the builders were saying that the average cost in these type of local fees, local, state, and federal fees added $130-some thousand to a new home. So our new homes start around 400, 450, 500,000. So I asked my planning department, I said, tell me, what are the total costs coming from New Lenox for that $450,000 home? For a 4-bedroom house, it's about 30 grand. And that includes not just our fees, which are minimal. We have a school construction fee because obviously taxes are paid in arrears, impact fees. So that's 30 grand. I don't know if the state and the federal government's getting another 100,000. I doubt it real seriously. So that's not entirely true. That's not entirely true. A couple of things I want to touch on that you talked about. Number one, Article 10 of the state constitution says that the state of Illinois is primarily responsible for funding public education, which to me means at least 50.1%. Here in the New Lenox Grade School District, we get about 12%. Just imagine if we got 50% for education, how much lower the property taxes would be. When that was taken to the Supreme Court, of course, it's all politics, as we know as well. They said, well, that means they should make their best effort if they can. I don't know how you interpret are responsible as do your best, but that's a big driver of that. But the topic I want to go to next, you talk about taxes, and you talked about the millionaire tax. We have a flat tax here in Illinois. And that is one of the advantages here in Illinois is our retirees don't pay income tax, which is great. It is definitely a benefit of being here. We have our flat tax. We talk about the millionaire's tax. Here's the issue. Correct me, please, if I'm wrong. It would require an amendment, a constitutional amendment, to change our structure to go from a flat tax to a graduated income tax. Politically speaking, it's really easy for most people to get on board and say, we're just going to tax millionaires. But once we go from that flat tax to a graduated tax, all it takes is legislation to increase everybody's taxes, including retirees, correct?
Yes.
All right. So why would anyone in Illinois, you'd have to have complete trust in the Illinois legislature that we won't be taxed more. Sorry, I love you, buddy. You do a great job for us, but state does not get my trust on that, to trust that only millionaires are going to see an increase in their tax. Do you see any reason why anyone should support going to a graduated tax?
Well, you can't bind a future General Assembly.
Sure, exactly.
So there's no way of knowing what could happen in the future. And, the not taxing of retirement income is a big competitive advantage that Illinois has and shouldn't give up. I have not seen any attempt to try and tax retirement income that's had any momentum at all in all the time I've been there. It's been thrown around a few times, but have not seen any momentum for that.
All right, well, Brad, I'll ask you, what, in your experience, what confidence would you have, and we'll even say with future legislative bodies, that if we went to a graduated income tax, that ultimately we all wouldn't start paying a little more? I mean,
well, I think if there was a constitutional amendment that was approved by the people that allows a different structure so that it can just be changed, and right now the General Assembly can change it. It's just got to be the same for everybody.
Right.
So, but if there just gets changed to a graduated, I think then it would be a lot easier to just tinker here and tinker there, and the General Assembly would find a way to justify making those changes. And so should they be made? I would say today, no.
Right.
But, is there a day that comes that maybe they should be? Possibly. So it's always the law of unintended consequences that we are worried about. So if this is done, then what? And it may not be today. Maybe it's just the millionaires today. But 5 years from now, it's like, well, maybe it's the half a millionaires. Or maybe it's something else. Or maybe it's tall people or skinny people or, retirees after they're 67 or, whatever. So I think if the opportunity is there, the opportunity will be taken.
Right. And That's not just in Illinois. That's just human nature. That's just a work of government. And
Well, it's-
when you run out, when you want to continue these political programs and you have to pay for them somehow, and you have to look at every possible revenue source, that becomes one of the possible revenue sources.
Well, I mean, God gave us free will. And, we're the only creatures that justify decisions. Like when you're watching your dog in the morning, the dog's not really countering, like, I wonder what's going to happen later today if I jump on the couch right now.
Right.
You might know that if he jumps on the couch right now, he's going to get a little reprimand.
Right.
But he's not thinking about later today.
No.
But we can justify later today. Like, well, it'll be okay. And so I may get a little reprimand right now, but later it's going to be okay. And so it's human nature, and people can justify anything that they want, and maybe justifiably.
Sure.
But, I think, like Mark Twain said, all things in moderation, including moderation. So we have to take things a little slowly, make sure it's balanced. Don't get too greedy. Don't get too loose with stuff. Don't get too tight with stuff. But if you open the door's open.
The door is open. All right. Let's wrap it up unless there's other things that you guys want to discuss. But I told this story the other day, and it resonated with a lot. I posted it on social media. It resonated with a lot of people. Friday night, I went to see Dave Chappelle at the United Center, which was a great show. I love Chappelle.
Yeah, I saw, he was here for the Obama Center opening, and I thought, well, that's interesting. And so he had to show that.
He did a show at the United Center.
Oh.
Yeah, it was of course a great show. So on the way home, I love Harold's Chicken. I'm sure you guys have been. I hope if you haven't been to Harold's Chicken, please go. But I love Harold's Chicken. So we're at 72nd and Western at midnight, getting some Harold's Chicken. And I run into, some people there. It's a busy time at night for Harold's. Midnight it's great. So in comes a guy about my age, a black man about my age, and we just started talking. And it was funny. We were talking about the problems of the world. And really, it's not about Republican, Democrat. It's not about black and white. It's not about Christian, Jew, Muslim. It's about haves and have-nots. Who has it? Because I'm going to tell you, as tough as it is for people in urban Chicago, Philadelphia, Detroit, because they don't have access to quality education or perhaps jobs, the same thing happens in rural Kentucky and in West Virginia, for poor white people. So it's really a have or have nots. But what we have seen, and I think social media, that's why I can't stand it, but we have to be a part of this divide, and we're tribal, and we have to pick sides, and it's partisanship, and people feel like they want to belong to a group as opposed to belonging to the group of humanity. We have to belong to some tribe and hate each other. That is what's happening in government, and it's happening in politics. But I just real quickly tell you that in 1999, I went through the FBI National Academy in Quantico for 3 months as a police chief. And that was before 9/11, so you could go to the Capitol. So we're walking around the Capitol, and I run into Orrin Hatch and Ted Kennedy.
Yeah.
Now, you couldn't get any for the liberal lion and the far right and they're laughing. And as a matter of fact, Orrin Hatch had his arm around Ted Kennedy's. They're laughing. And me and two other guys stopped and talked to him. Then we ended up going up to Orrin Hatch's office and talking to him. It was political theater, but they still worked together and they got things done. What we're seeing now is that doesn't happen anymore. It's not just political theater. I know that there are times where there are good people like you who don't care about R&D that will reach across the aisle and work together, and things do get accomplished. But it's become so much political theater, and we're all paying for that. What do you see? How hard is it for you to want to work with your counterparts on the other side of the aisle if there is political pressure from the party to say, no, you got to toe this line? And it's both parties. Yeah. This isn't just one party. I mean, this is just in general.
Social media overall, in my opinion, does more harm than good.
No question.
Now, I love wishing someone a happy birthday and seeing the beautiful steak on the grill.
Yep.
I love that.
Yeah.
And it allows me to keep in touch with some people that I don't see. But, boy, it's...
just misinformation.
Yeah, it's a lot. But, I think that what makes me very concerned about the future of politics, not only here in Illinois, but
it's
in the nation's capital, is this big divide. And I think that there are a lot more legislators in Springfield in the House. I can only speak to that.
Sure.
That on both sides of the aisle that get along very well. Go to dinner together, socialize together, talk about issues regularly. When we're on the floor talking about different issues all the time. But, it's the fringes, I guess, on both sides where it doesn't allow much of that. It doesn't put up with a lot of that.
They don't, but when it comes time to support legislation, and again, this is not just Illinois, there is political pressure, whether it be from a powerful governor, from a powerful president. I mean, look at our president. You could be his best friend today and you say one thing wrong and all of a sudden he's running someone against you in a primary and you're gone. I mean, when you look at people who are no longer in Congress that were incredibly conservative because they crossed him, same thing applies with our governor or other governors. It's not Republican or Democrat. Whoever wields the power, whoever has the money, there's going to be a repercussion for a state representative, a state senator, a congressman, a United States senator to vote a certain way on some of these big major issues, even if they don't feel like that's the right thing to do. So that's got to be difficult as a legislator to combat that.
It is. It's one of the reasons why I'm so loved and so hated, because I've been very independent in my role, and I vote that way. Because I really pay attention to my district and what my constituents are telling me, and what their positions are on certain issues, and I try to reflect that as best I can.
And you do an excellent job of it. And I will tell you, I've invited other state legislators to come here, ones that did vote in ways that I felt were very detrimental to local government, which is where I'm supposed to be representing as my community, and they've politely declined because they didn't want to have to answer for those votes that I think they know were bad votes, but they felt compelled for political reasons to support those. So for you, here's my thing. You have been very supportive, obviously, of local government. And I will tell you, we have 3 Democrats representing us and 1 Republican in the House and the Senate. And quite honestly, all 4 are very receptive when we pick up the phone and they call. And for the majority of time, they voted the ways that we kind of feel represents our community. So I'm grateful for that. I'm okay if somebody doesn't. If they say, look, Mayor, I can't be with you on this, and this is why. But when I can't get a this is why, then I know it's only political motivation, and that's bad for the people.
Yeah, when I was in office as mayor, we had a few issues that everybody loved and everybody hated, and I always said that on my tombstone or my gravesite there'd be flowers on one side of it and probably something else on the other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think maybe to wrap up from my perspective, my personal opinion, I said I'm an optimist. A lot of people say, oh, it's never been this bad and it's unprecedented, and nobody even knew what that word meant until the last decade. But everything is unprecedented now, and it's never been this bad. And I would just remind everybody that it may not have been this bad in our immediate memory. We are about to celebrate or commemorate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And in that time, we started with very salacious things that people would say by just posting them on a poll.
Right.
And nobody ever knew except the person that read that. And by the way, most people couldn't read, but you would never see what was said about you. Now, today, you see it instantly.
Right.
But there were things that could never be refuted. There was no fact-checking. We've been through a revolution. We've been through an industrialization. We've been through a civil war. Mm-hmm. We've been through 2 world wars. We have been through impeachments. We've been through resignations. I'm talking about the state and federal levels. We've been through indictments. We've been through a lot of bad things. And so when people say it's never been this bad, I don't subscribe to that, because what's left out is all of the good things. We have been through so many positive things. We have been through the American century, where we dominated development and initiative and curiosity and medical devices and procedures and pharmaceutical opportunities and educational experiences and scientific. We have been through so much that is positive that is still here. And so when people say it's never been this bad, I agree. We got some interesting people involved and some interesting things happening. But man, I also believe in the American people, and I believe in our friends and neighbors, whoever they are, whatever village or city or town they live in. And I think we'll be okay. And at the end of the day, as we come up on the 25th anniversary of 9/11, I mean, that day, I could get emotional right now thinking about it. We were all Americans.
That's right.
And in fact, I remember the Queen of England, in response, said, "Today we are all Americans."
100%.
We still have that. We just have to bring it out. And so maybe that's what we should focus on. We got some blemishes and we've got some things that are not great, but man, we are still all Americans.
Brad, I love what you said. I agree with you 100%. But I think in order for us to do what you just said, we need to engage the people. This build plan was a small part of it, but it really resonated with me that, you know what? The people will step up. If they are busy running their lives, they are busy taking care of their kids and trying to pay their mortgage, and that's what they should be doing. But because we are seeing this push further and further away from where the majority of the people live, it's my obligation as a mayor, it's your obligation in your role, it's your obligation in your role to say, stop. We can't stop it. Only the people can stop it. We do live in the greatest country in the world, and we do have amazing people that live here. And there should be opportunity for everybody. There is common ground. My story about the Herald chicken is just that. This is not about that. The majority of us live in this place. But I think what I will spend the rest of my time doing, just so you know, is what we did with this build plan. I am going to be doing more and more engaging our people and having them get involved, because it did have a direct impact, as you know, on our state representatives and state legislators, because they didn't just hear from some mayor. They heard from thousands of constituents that said, no, we can't have this. So I share your optimism and enthusiasm for this great country, and we have been through a lot, there's no question. It's just harder on elected officials because everyone now has a voice on social media to criticize, and I don't care who you are, it's tough to take that criticism. And you start thinking about, I want to get reelected, I want to do good things for the people, I don't want to hear anyone crapping on me. And so there we are. But anything else that you gentlemen would like to add?
Great conversation.
This was great.
I love it.
You got the big shot here from the IML, and good to be with you, Mayor. And
I think you got the 8th most senior member of the Illinois House of Representatives right here.
Yes.
You got a true voice for the Southland and all of the state, and you. You're a great mayor.
I appreciate that.
And I can tell you, I know the ones that aren't. But there are a lot of great local officials, and you got a great community. Your residents are engaged.
They are.
And that's what I'm talking about. So thanks for having us here today.
Yeah, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your representation. We truly appreciate it. If nothing else, you're always incredibly transparent and honest about things that are happening. That's all we can ask. That's what we talk about, because just why it's called Too Honest for Social Media.
Right.
I know when I call you, I'm not going to get some bullshit answer. I'm going to get the real story of where we're at. So thank you both, Don. Thank you, as always, for taking care of us here. And for all of you that are watching or listening today, I want to thank you for watching this edition of Too Honest for Social Media.
Stealing your life away, denial defines the fall. Choose your fate from hate to the black hole. Either way, the fire escape is closed. You're the first.